There are stories Native American tribes still refuse to tell after dark.
Not because they're old, but because some believe they're still happening.
These legends aren't just about monsters hiding in the woods. They're about real fears, grief that never left, spirits that never forgave, and things you should never answer, no matter how human they sound. From skinwalkers that steal faces, to babies that cry just to drag you under. These stories were never meant to entertain. They were meant to warn. And every tribe had at least one. In this video, we're bringing the most terrifying Native American legends back to life. But don't skip a single one, because the last legend on this list is the one nobody talks about. The one so horrifying you won't believe it. Long before roads and radios, when winters bit harder than wolves and snow came up to your waist, the Algonquian-speaking tribes had a name for what could happen when survival crossed a line. They called it the Wendigo. Now, the Wendigo wasn't some monster hiding in the woods, waiting to leap out of a tree. No, it was far worse than that. The Wendigo was you, after you gave in, after the food ran out, after the cold settled into your bones, after you looked at a family member and didn't see a loved one anymore, just meat. That's when it started. They said if a person resorted to cannibalism, they'd become something else entirely. Their body would wither, their skin stretch tight like old leather over a skeleton. Their eyes glow with a cold fire, and no matter how much they ate, they would never feel full again, just a walking hunger, cursed to wander the forest, always starving, always watching. It was a story whispered around campfires, not just to scare people, but to teach a hard truth. When you lose your compassion, you lose your soul.
And it wasn't just about eating flesh. The Wendigo also came to represent greed, selfishness, and the kind of ambition that devours others just to feed itself. You didn't need snow to meet the Wendigo. Sometimes all it took was forgetting what it meant to be human. The elders told this story for centuries, not to frighten children, but to remind them hunger may test your body, but it should never cost you your spirit. And besides, if skipping lunch makes you irritable, imagine going 2 weeks with nothing but frozen tree bark. You'd be seeing glowing eyes, too. Now, if the Wendigo was a warning about hunger, the next legend speaks to a different kind of appetite. Across several Native American tribes, including the Lakota, Ponca, Ojibwe, and Muskogee, there's an old tale of a spirit called Deer Woman. And unlike the frothing beasts or flying heads of other stories, this spirit didn't growl or scream. She smiled. She was said to be stunning, graceful as a breeze, eyes soft as dusk. But if you looked closely, something wasn't quite right. Her feet weren't human, they were hooves. Slender deer legs tucked beneath a long skirt. She'd appear to men who had done wrong, womanizers, violent drunks, cheaters, or those who thought themselves untouchable. She'd bat her lashes, lure them into the forest, and that would be the last time anyone saw them. One man was found days later, or what was left of him. His chest had been crushed like a stomped melon, ribs snapped inward. His face was frozen in a smile, not his own. And carved into the bark above him, in clean, deliberate slashes, were the words, "She smiled first." Some believed she was the spirit of a woman wronged by a man long ago. Others said she was sent by the spirits to keep balance, a walking reminder that no harm goes unpunished. Either way, she wasn't out to hurt the innocent. Her fury had focus. Elders told this story with a straight face, but every now and then a sly smile. It wasn't just about fear, it was about justice. A sort of supernatural moral compass in heels. And while it may sound eerie, there's wisdom here. Communities only survive when respect is held sacred. For women, for harmony, and for the boundaries we pretend no one sees. So the next time someone boasts about being a heartbreaker, maybe remind them, the forest has eyes and will kill you if you misbehave. If Deer Woman was a killer wrapped in beauty, the next legend is something far less forgiving and far more dangerous. Among the Cherokee people, there's a warning passed down through generations about a creature called the Ukdena, a horned serpent said to dwell near sacred places. You'd know it if you saw it, though most didn't live long enough to describe the details. It was enormous, like a fallen tree come to life. Its scales glittered like fire, and at the center of its forehead sat a glowing jewel, said to shine like the sun itself. That jewel was called the Umansuti. It wasn't just beautiful,
It was powerful. Warriors believed that anyone who claimed it would become unstoppable, blessed with visions, strength, and magic. And so, many tried. The problem was, the Utena wasn't guarding that jewel for decoration. It was protecting something sacred, and those who hunted it with selfish hearts tended to vanish. Not in battle, but in madness. Some didn't even have to face the creature. They simply dreamed of it too vividly, and never quite came back. One warrior followed its trail for days, swore he saw the jewel blinking between trees. When they found him, he was curled under a pine, eyes wide open, whispering to something that wasn't there. His tongue had been bitten off, and the only word carved into the dirt beside him was mine. The Cherokee never told this story just to scare children. They told it to remind people, not all power is meant to be taken. Some things, like sacred knowledge or spiritual energy, are meant to be approached with humility, not hunger. Even drawing the Uktena without permission was said to bring bad luck. The message was clear. Curiosity is good. Greed is not. So, next time you hear about a glowing serpent deep in the woods, maybe leave it be. Some treasures are traps disguised as beauty. If you thought a horned serpent guarding ancient treasure was unsettling, wait until you hear about a disembodied head that wouldn't stop screaming. Among the Iroquois people, also known as the Haudenosaunee, there's a legend that begins not with a ghost or a beast, but with a betrayal. The story goes that long ago, a group of young warriors grew tired of their elders. They didn't want to hear the old stories anymore, didn't want to follow the rules. So they rebelled, violently. They turned against the very women and elders who had raised them, and killed them. What followed wasn't just guilt, it was consequent. From that act of cruelty rose the flying head, a massive, floating human head with glowing red eyes, long black hair like storm clouds, and a mouth that never stopped wailing. It would swoop down on villages at night, shrieking so loud it could crack tree limbs. And unlike a spirit that hides, the flying head wanted to be seen. It wanted everyone to know what happens when tradition is cast aside. Some versions say it was nearly impossible to kill. Others claim it vanished after a brave woman roasted chestnuts and calmly ate them in front of it, confusing the creature into silence. Either way, the message was clear. When you turn your back on the wisdom of your ancestors, that rejection may return, with a voice you can't silence. It wasn't just a monster. It was memory. Regret. The kind that grows teeth. So far, we've met greed, vanity, and guilt. But next, we meet a legend that wears your skin and knows your name. The story goes that some medicine people, once respected as healers and spiritual guides, began to abuse their power. They performed forbidden rituals, turning away from the good path. And in doing so, they became something else. Skinwalkers are said to be able to take the form of animals: wolves, coyotes, owls. They can also wear the skin of others, quite literally, and imitate voices so perfectly, you'd swear it was your sister calling from the edge of the forest. Except the eyes are wrong. The voice sounds hollow, and when you turn your back, it doesn't blink. What made the Skinwalker so terrifying wasn't just what it could do. It was the reminder that evil doesn't always come from outside the community. Sometimes it's someone you knew, someone who had a choice, and took the darker road. The lesson here wasn't about superstition, it was about discipline and intention. Power without values becomes corruption, and even the strongest medicine can poison if the heart behind it is lost. So when elders said, "Don't go walking after dark," or "Never trust a call that comes from the trees," it wasn't just for your safety. It was because sometimes the face you recognize is the one that's already been stolen. Now let's step away from voices and look at a legend that pulls you in with music and celebration, right before it burns you alive. Among the Kwakwakawa people of the Pacific Northwest, there's a chilling story told during sacred winter ceremonies. It's about spirits known as the Cannibal Dancers, entities that don't snarl or stalk. Instead, they celebrate. The tale begins like any good festival. There's music, food, laughter. A group of joyful, masked dancers appears in the forest, beckoning others to join. And when they do, the dancing begins. Except it never ends. These weren't friendly revelers. They were cannibal spirits who lured the unwise into a trance, a state so deep you'd dance until your body gave out, until your bones cracked and your mind begged for mercy. And then, the dancers would drag you into the woods to cook you. It sounds absurd. It's meant to. But it carried a real warning. This wasn't just about ghosts. It was a spiritual lesson wrapped in dark theater. The Cannibal Dancers represented the danger of uncontrolled desire, of being swept away by pleasure without purpose. In tribal ceremonies, mock versions of this dance were performed to teach discipline. Even the wildest moments had meaning. Joy, they said, should always walk hand in hand with awareness. After tales of dancing spirits and burning bones, you'd think nothing else could catch you off guard. But out on the open plains, where the sky feels endless and the wind never sleeps, there's a legend that does just that. Among the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples, stories began to surface in the 18th and 19th centuries, after horses had arrived from Europe and forever changed life on the plains. Horses were a gift, a symbol of freedom, strength, and speed. But as many soon learned, not every horse was a blessing. The story goes that there's a creature, tall, broad, shaped like a horse, but it walks upright. It speaks in a man's voice, always calm, always inviting. It appears mostly at night just outside campfires near lonely trails. If you mount it, the others say, you vanish. Some men were never seen again. Others returned, but something was off. They were silent, cold, as if part of them had been swallowed. What made this tale so chilling wasn't just the image of a horse with hands or the voice of a man. It was what it represented: power without understanding. Horses brought speed and strength, yes, but also raiding, conquest, and greed. This creature was the spirit of all that, in physical form. The elders told this story to remind people, not every tool makes you stronger. Some can carry you too far and never bring you back. So if you ever saw a Mustang in the moonlight, standing too tall, don't ask questions. Just keep walking. Because sometimes knowing the road is better than riding the wrong one. Up next is one you definitely don't want to miss, because this woman doesn't just watch, she knocks. And she's even more dangerous than the last. Among the Lakota, Dakota, and Sioux nations, there's a story that took root during the 1800s, a time when smallpox swept through villages, children died by the dozens, and families were forced from their homelands onto reservations. It was during this unimaginable sorrow that people began to speak of a woman in a white buckskin dress. She would appear just outside the teepee at night, dressed in pale white hide, long braids flowing, standing completely still. Her face was beautiful, but her eyes, empty, not angry, not kind, just hollow, like they'd seen too much. She didn't scream, she didn't chase, she simply knocked, and if you opened the flap, it meant someone in your family would die. It wasn't just a ghost story to keep people indoors. She became a symbol of grief itself, a quiet visitor that came after too many losses, after too many burials, after families had run out of tears. Some say she was once a mother who lost her own children to sickness. Others believe she was the spirit of every loved one who died without a proper goodbye. Either way, her presence reminded people that grief isn't something you run from. It comes. It knocks, and you must sit with it. The elders didn't speak of her to scare. They spoke of her to honor the pain that had no voice. When she appeared, it meant a heart was breaking, somewhere nearby. So if you ever dream of a woman in white, don't be afraid. But don't open the door either. Because some knocks come quiet, but others cry out. And the next one, it sounds just like a baby. After the silent knock of grief came sorrow in another form, one that cried out from the edges of rivers, lakes, and springs across the Great Basin. The Shoshone, Ute, Paiute, and neighboring tribes all told a version of the same chilling legend, the water babies. It begins with a sound. Soft, distant, unmistakable. A baby, crying alone near the water. Instinct tells you to go. Any decent person would. But the elders warned that's exactly what they want. You see, the water babies weren't truly infants. Some say they were the spirits of real children, those lost to disease, famine, or tragedy. Others believe they were older than memory itself, shapeshifters or trickster spirits wearing sorrow like a mask. But what they all agreed on was this: if you reach for them, they reach back. They'd grab your arm, your ankle, and pull you under. The surface would calm again, as if nothing ever happened. The warning wasn't just about avoiding deep water. It was also about understanding the difference between compassion and impulse. Sometimes your heart pulls you toward danger. Not every cry should be answered. Not every sorrow wants to be saved. Some tribes say the water babies giggle after the splash. Others say they scream like they're still falling. Either way, no one ever forgot the lesson. So if you're near a river at dusk and you hear the faint cry of a child, pause. Listen with your heart, but trust your instincts. Among the Iroquois, or Haudenosaunee, there's an ancient tale of beings called the Stone Giants. They weren't ghosts, they weren't clever shapeshifters, they were exactly what they sounded like. Towering, terrifying figures with bodies made of rock, skin like granite, hearts like ice. They wandered the land, hunting not animals, but people. Entire villages were crushed underfoot. The Stone Giants had no remorse, no sense of balance, just hunger and destruction. Some versions say they were once human, cursed by the Creator for their brutality. Others believe they were a force of nature, sent to punish a world that had forgotten how to live with respect. But no matter where the story started, it always ended the same way. The giants fell. Not by warriors, not by weapons. They simply became too heavy, too slow, too consumed by their own mass. The earth, they say, swallowed them back. Their bones became boulders. Their roars faded into wind. This wasn't just a story to scare children into behaving. It was a deep moral lesson. Even power must bow to balance. The world may allow harm for a time, but it never allows it forever. The Stone Giants remind us that cruelty has weight, and over time that weight pulls even the strongest down. So when you see the ancient hills, or feel the stillness before a storm, you might be standing where a giant once fell. And that brings us to the end. These weren't just ghost stories. They were mirrors, reflecting our fears, our values, and our choices. Legends, yes, but legends with something to say. And they still whisper if you listen. The legends pass down through firelight, fear, and survival. They weren't just stories to scare children. They were warnings, memories, and reminders that the past never stays buried for long. Some of these spirits punished greed. Others came for the guilty. But all of them had one thing in common. They never really left. Even today, people still hear footsteps, still see shadows, still whisper these names. Just in case something is listening. If any of these stories stayed with you, if even one made you glance over your shoulder, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Which legend haunted you most?